So let's take a little bit of time and explore this question. Why does the teaching profession utilize an established framework and standards for the profession? So what do we mean by an established framework? So here in the state of Idaho and in a number of other states and school districts, a framework for teaching is utilized that came from Charlotte Danielson's framework. And it helps us conceptualize the range of responsibilities of a professional teacher by looking at planning and preparation, the classroom environment, professional responsibilities, instruction, each one of these being the major components with a number of subcomponents that teachers need to make sure that they're doing their best to incorporate and to utilize effectively. Now, not all states will utilize this Charlotte Danielson framework for teaching. But again, each state, each school district will have some sort of framework that you as a teacher need to know, understand, and be familiar with. Now, because teaching is a profession, it has standards. The same way that the profession of being a medical doctor has standards, or being a lawyer. And the most widely adopted and adapted set of standards for this profession are the InTask Model Core Teaching Standards. These have been adopted by a number of states around the country. These standards are the result of a number of different groups getting together and saying, if we really want to be perceived as professionals and to be able to fulfill all of our professional responsibilities and meet the needs of our students, what are the standards that each of us need to know and abide by? So you will see standards about the learner and learning, about content knowledge, about our instructional practice, and professional responsibility. So whether we're talking about an established framework being used at a district or a state level, or a national set of standards for the profession, it's important that we know and are familiar with the framework and standards of our craft, and that we understand why our profession utilizes an established framework and standards for the profession. So let's take a look at an example. Let's start with this question. Is there such thing as a professional snowboarder? And if so, who determines who is professional and who is just doing it for recreational purposes? So what I'd like you to do is watch the following event at the X Games. This is called the Knuckle Huck. And without having a tremendous amount of knowledge about the profession of snowboarding, try and determine who is doing it the best in this event at the X Games.
This year it's a different story, Brandon.
Such a bummer, that injury happening literally a month before X Games. But he's in it now and he's healthy. But kicking things off, Yo Aizawa, the X Games rookie.
Actually competed against him in the rail jam only a few hours ago. And he just attacks the course differently. We saw in the rail jam and in the slopestyle Yo take such unique lines through that rail section. Here, taking a very unique line, carving around the kicker, and then going on the heel side edge, frontside 720
Yo
there.
just hits different.
Yo just hits different.
But so busy, as you said. He was in rail jam, he's in knuckle hook, he was in slopestyle eliminations, he was in big air. 4 events for the X Games rookie. How about 16-year-old Jake Cantor out of Silverthorne, Colorado? And we've got comments coming in from Wendy's. We're excited to watch some knuckle huck and say knuckle huck. Knuckle huck, knuckle huck, knuckle huck. Hashtag X Games. Yeah, Craig and I are going to be saying that quite a bit. Just be ready.
Just be ready.
Comment section, be ready. It's coming.
Jake Cantor, a.k.a. Sweet Baby Jake, because he's nice like that, has one of the best TikToks. If you're on TikTok, go ahead and follow Jake Cantor.
Also follow the X Games TikTok.
True.
We got some fire TikToks out here this week. Zeb Powell out of Waynesville, North Carolina, 20 years old, making his X Games debut.
And that coffin to backflip? That is crazy. The follow cam is tough because he pushes so much snow up as he slides on his back there. Goes coffin slide, and then when he gets some amplitude, look at the full coffin slide. He's on his back, and then he just has to be patient, wait till he's in the air and finish that back. That's very cool.
That looks a lot like the coffin slide I saw from you, partner, earlier today in the rail jam.
Thank you very much. I try to put that down on the middle section here.
So you can see how difficult it would be to decide who's doing it well, who's doing the best, who should be the winner in an event like this without clear standards for the sport and profession of snowboarding. I mean, think about it. There are so many different professionals in the sport, all with their own unique style and skill set. But just like in teaching, having a common set of standards and framework for the profession helps us answer questions such as who is doing it well, who is doing it the best. What can we learn from each of the professionals? How can we improve the sport? as well as how do we help those new to the sport or profession develop to their full potential. That's why we need a framework for snowboarding, for teaching, or for any profession. A framework helps establish clear definitions of and procedures for certifying of expertise. It helps us decide who's novice, who's amateur, who's expert, who's elite. Just because I've been snowboarding for 5 or 6 years doesn't mean I can declare myself expert or elite. There have to be established definitions and procedures for certifying. In other words, I'd have to be able to compete at a certain level. I would have had to have entered and won so many competitions at that level. The same goes for teaching. A framework helps us identify who is novice, amateur, expert, and so on. But it's important to keep in mind that a framework is not to keep people out of the profession. We don't establish these definitions and procedures for certifying to keep people from entering the profession, just as a means of quality control. And whether we're talking about snowboarding or teaching, having high, clear standards of practice and a common vocabulary allows us to foster accountability, have dialogue, and monitor and track progress. As we watch snowboarders compete, we can't just make up names for the tricks that they're doing. Once it's accepted as a competitive trick, someone has to name it, and we need to use the same vocabulary consistently. Likewise, we need to agree upon what it is that we call this element of instruction. Are we going to call the opening minutes of class, where we try to get the student's attention, the anticipatory set, the hook, the lead? Having a common vocabulary allows us to have better dialogue, holds us accountable, and helps encourage and track progress. A framework also helps us to conceptualize the model of all the complexity of the activity. In other words, what really constitutes snowboarding? Is it just finding some sort of hill, making our own board to strap to our feet, falling on our face and our rear end? At what point do we really call it snowboarding? The same holds true in teaching, where we're trying to conceptualize what do we really mean by teaching? What are the major elements that it's composed of? And more specifically, what do we mean when we talk about instruction? Having a framework allows us to hone in on elements such as communicating with students, using questions and discussion techniques, as well as a number of other key elements that we should all be working towards as professionals in education. Another major reason that we need a framework for our profession is to help structure outside evaluation, to help us do self-assessment, and to help us engage and reflect on our own practice. Instead of just going with our gut and saying, well, I think that lesson went well, or that lesson went poorly, we can seek to evaluate and improve upon specific elements. We'd be more accurate in saying, the use of questioning and discussion techniques was really poor today. The quality of questions was low, and we had low levels of participation from our students. But when I look at the assessment aspect of this lesson, I did communicate clear assessment criteria and work to monitor student learning in order to provide feedback to my students. In this way, a framework can help structure for outside evaluation, self-assessment, and reflection on our practice. At this point, could you take a minute and pause and think, what are some other elite professions that seem to follow the same pattern of utilizing and establishing frameworks and standards? I think of doctors, pilots, all of these life-saving professions that we're very grateful that there's an established framework that governs who is allowed to operate in the profession. So if a framework is good enough for a life-saving profession, such as a doctor or a pilot, doesn't it also make sense that we would need a framework in a life-changing profession like teaching? So as we think through the need for a framework in any profession or professional activity, we are able to better understand the need for it in a profession such as education. As we think about this question, why have a framework for teaching? We realize that a framework for professional practice can be used for a wide range of purposes, whether we're talking about meeting the needs of novice teachers or working to enhance veteran teachers' skills. After all, teaching is complex, so it's helpful and even necessary to have a roadmap through the territory that's structured around a shared understanding of teaching. But we mustn't confuse having standards for a profession as standardizing teaching. The intent is not to make sure that everybody goes about it the same way. In fact, if anything, having established standards helps us understand our responsibilities better so that we can be more creative in our craft. I know that as a brand new novice teacher, I was really concerned with day-to-day survival. Having an established framework helped me understand what are the key elements that I should be focused on each day. It also helped me reflect upon and seek to improve my practice in very specific elements of instruction: building an effective classroom environment, planning and preparation, as well as my other professional responsibilities. So in summary, it's important that we understand the need for and are familiar with the established frameworks and standards within our profession.